So I'm pretty excited about this unit. It's something that I've always wanted to try, and it's probably something that's around you all the time and you're not necessarily aware of the background. But we're going to look at sort of the art toy sculpture. So let's look at a little bit about, the history and where it all comes from. Now I want to go back to 1917, to the early part of the 1900s. And we looked at our last unit for neographic art about how a lot of artists, because of the war and invention of the camera and the invention of psychology, that people were starting to look at, abstract pieces where you're painting like sort of unconsciously, or painting kind of dreamlike pictures. Well, there's also another sort of way that art sort of diverged 100 years ago. And if this didn't happen 100 years ago, we wouldn't have street art toys today. So one of these things is something called the ready-made. So ready-made is something that's already made. So in the beginning of the 1900s, it's like it was the start of the Industrial Revolution, right? Where cities started getting bigger, a lot of more people living there, and we had to start to mass produce stuff to make things include food, everyday items, to make people's lives easier, and to be able to support the populations. So there's this guy called Marcel Duchamp from France, and he termed the coin ready-made. So something that was already made. For example, the shovel. This is a shovel from 1917 that you could buy. It looks very similar to the shovels that we have today. It's ready-made. It was made in a factory. Of course, some people probably put a few parts together. We don't know who those people are, but something that's already made. So something that's already made versus something that's handmade, which is what we sort of respect artists for, is that they've handcrafted something, and this is why we admire, their techniques. So in 1917, this guy Marcel Duchamp does crazy things. He starts taking things that are already made, like a shovel, putting it in an art gallery. He's the guy, if I've taught you before, he actually took a urinal and he put it in the art gallery. Here he's got a stool and he put a bicycle wheel in it. And he called it art. Now, the reason why he did this is in 1917, he belonged to a group of people that were really trying to push the boundaries of what art was. And the group that he belonged in said, we believe that everything is art. Anything can be art. Let's have an art show, and everybody that submits an art piece is going to go in the gallery and nothing will be rejected. Because back then, art's like really regulated and there's a lot of rules, and it's like, for the upper class, and it's an art gallery. So this is why they did this. So he's like, okay, well, let's test these people and see if they really truly believe that anything can be art. And so for this art show, he submits a urinal, but he doesn't sign his name to it. He signs a fake name to it just to test and see if they actually accept it or not, because they said anything can be art and we will accept everything. But they rejected this piece. So he kind of called them on it, but the conversation is, well, what is art? Like, this is still handcrafted and it's made by somebody, but just because they're not an artist, they're, we kind of put them lower on the totem pole, like an everyday item. So that's in the beginning of the 1917s. Okay, so at the beginning of the 1900s, just looking at everyday pieces that could possibly be art. So let's skip ahead a little bit to the 1950s. So Marcel Duchamp still did a bunch of stuff in the 1950s, but because of the stuff that he did, it led to something called pop art, which is popular art. And some of this stuff might be familiar to you, and it's still very relevant today. So in the 1950s, the artists are starting to challenge the traditions of fine art, right? The Renaissance portraits that were handmade, painted, and put in gold frames, right? That sort of imagery versus imagery from popular culture, mass culture. So everyday items such as advertising, comic books, everyday mass-produced objects, which is a lot like what Marcel Duchamp was doing, like with the bicycle wheel, the urinal, the shovel, right? So its aim then is to use images of popular culture, not from elitist culture, not from fine Chinese porcelain piece that's 3,000 years old, but every day, like a comic book or like a shovel or something. Okay, so everyday items, that relate to everyday people, not just a few people. So that's their goal in the 1950s, right? So one of the most famous pop artists is a guy named Andy Warhol, and you've probably heard of him. And so their sort of mantra, their sort of mission in the 1950s is something about life is art and art is life. So they're fed up with going to museums and not seeing any representations of life as though we all know it through the artworks, right? When you go to an art gallery, back then especially, and even still today, you see art that you don't even connect with, right? It's from, rich people and special things that we don't have any connection to. So it's very elitist, and it's meant, for rich people back then especially. So Andy Warhol starts painting things like Campbell's soup cans. This is one of his most famous things. And why he does this is that when you go grocery shopping, you go down the aisles, what you see, especially then, and we still see this now, is Campbell's soup cans all laid up this way, all the same sort of labeling, but they have different names, etc., right? And so if we do go down a grocery store aisle, we see this as an everyday person. So he's pushing the boundaries of what is art. Can art be anything, like Marcel Duchamp, right? But he's bringing like everyday, regular things into the art gallery. So this is a big deal, right? So Andy Warhol, even packages of Brillo soap pads, it's like something advertising for the 1950s. So he made these boxes. He hand silk screened them. He did hand make them. They're not ready-made. He hand made them exactly in the same way the original Brillo boxes are, but he called them art, and he put them in an art gallery. So these are everyday experiences now that we're starting to see in galleries. This is popular culture, popular art. Pop art, right? A guy named Roy Litzenstein, he starts taking images from comic books and sort of isolating certain images and then recreating them really, really huge, right? And it's talking about like society and roles of women and how we communicate and what we find for entertainment. And another sculptor, Klaus Oldenburg, he starts taking everyday, boring, mundane objects and making them really huge and putting them in parks, right? So instead of like a big sculpture of a person that's made a difference in history or whatever, he uses the same sort of techniques, but he's taking an everyday object, so he's got a spoon with a cherry on it. Okay. Guy named Jeff Koons, he's still around. This is all made out of metal, but it looks like it's that balloon animal, right? And he starts making these sculptures and putting them up. So everyday regular objects are all of a sudden becoming art, and like everybody can connect with this, because who hasn't seen a balloon dog animal? So all this stuff is important, because without these things, without pop art, the connection to everyday objects such as comic books and advertisements, and especially like celebrities and things like that with popular culture that Andy Warhol made really famous, then these art toys wouldn't have a medium. So art toys are not like regular toys that you play with. They're toys that are made with artists, and they're artists that make them. They only make a small amount of them. Usually these artists have some sort of background in graphic design or illustration or fine art, and they make them out of like resin or latex or metal or vinyl or wood or plush. I've always wanted to do some out of vinyl, but obviously we can't afford it or do that. So the idea is that these are toys, these are art sculptures that people are going to want to collect. And they're for adults, they're not for little kids. Okay, so sometimes they're called urban vinyl, sometimes they're called street art toys, sometimes they're called designer toys. So the godfather of all of this, the godfather of urban vinyl, his name is Michael Lau, and he's from Hong Kong. So he was born in 1970 in Hong Kong, and the way he kind of came into this, what a lot of people did in the 1970s, and you can ask your parents about this, is that they were really influenced by the toys that were kind of coming out in the market back then. And one of the biggest ones was a G.I. Joe character. So it was like all these plastic figures like Star Wars and G.I. Joe, and kids spent all this time sort of playing and reenacting them. Now, so he was really influenced by those, and so he started creating his own toys, very small editions, and he did them in this hip hop sort of skateboarding culture. So so here's G.I. Joe, and if you ever see one of these still in a package, it's worth a huge amount of money. People totally collect things from their childhood, because all of us that were born in the 70s, we're all nostalgic now, and now that we have jobs and we're grown up, we can afford to, buy these things, and we're starting to like urge for, yearn for our childhood. So these things are worth money. So Michael Lau starts creating these vinyl toys, very much he creates his own sort of characters, but very much on the street arts, hip hop sort of culture. Even though he's from Hong Kong, this is very much sort of like image based, sort of what's happening at the time in the United States, particularly in New York. And we're going to look at that next when we look at hip hop and rap and things like that. So now his quote is very similar to what pop artists sort of believed about life is art, art is life. And his view of this is all art are toys and all toys are art. And why do people buy paintings or art or anything in the first place, rich or poor? Why is it even valuable? And it's because you have this emotional connection to it. You like something, right? It reminds you of something. Well, in his opinion, toys aren't much different, right? You have this, anything that you collect, whether they're paintings or whether they're sneakers or furniture or art toys, they all have some sort of emotional value, right? So again, why I would want a G.I. Joe toy, in my 40s is because it has some memories of my youth, and I would want that again, right? So that's what toys do for him. That's why people collect them. So just to let you know how rare and how popular Michael Lau's work is. He did this is a whole toy set that he did of all these little characters that are based on Krylon spray paint characters, and right now it's going for almost $16,000. Okay. Another of the leaders in this is also, after Michael Lau, was this company called Medicom, and one of the most famous ones is Bearbrick, and you might be familiar with this, and this comes out of Japan, so about 1996, and they also have another character called Koons, and they do lots of more, but one of the most famous ones is Bearbrick, and what they do is they have this blank character. You can get a number of different sizes, and what they do is they collaborate with other well-known artists in popular culture, or they take on or they feed into what's happening in popular culture right now, and then that's how they design the bear. And then these things are made in limited editions, hugely collectible. So this is the high end. So first of all, the highest end is Michael Lau, and then with Bearbrick. So they play around with, again, feeding into popular culture, like pop art, like what Andy Warhol and all of those artists did, right? So we have feeding into like popular culture, fantasy sort of characters like Batman, and talking about Tweety Bird and the cartoons and things like that. Even Breaking Bad, right? It goes on and on and on, right? These different characters. This is one made out of wood, right? This is selling for almost 2,000 pounds. So it's $4,000, $5,000, right? All made out of wood. So it's just, they take this basic image and they translate it over and over again with different materials, different themes, working with different artists, and depends what you're interested in. So you can see it's like Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, DC Comics, cartoons, manga, movies, TV shows, video games, music, sports, right? All of those things, that's all stuff from our popular culture, right? So they have a great idea. They have this blank image of the actual Bearbrick, and it just, they just put different skins on it pretty much. So hugely collectible. So that's very expensive, high end. Now in 2002 in California, the founder Paul Budnitz came up with a company called Kid Robot, and they have a whole bunch of different characters. One of the most famous ones is Money, and I don't know if you've seen this before, and they're vinyl blanks, and they're available for everyone to customize. So this isn't as collectible as Bearbrick or as expensive. They are very similar in the way is that you can purchase one, and then on top of it you can do your own designs. They also do a lot of like Bearbrick collaborations with with different artists that are street arts, that sort of popular culture as well. So, and they also do tribute. So this one's a tribute to Frida Kahlo. So taking some of our art, putting on there, different everyday people, tattoo artists, designers, also just doing their own thing on there. So amazing, right? Actually, at one point, a couple of years ago, you could actually buy these vinyl blanks at Dollarama. I was hoping that I could find some still, but I can't, right? And then it takes it up a notch, right, where people actually do some really crazy stuff with it, with Yoda, make it to lamp, doing this, right? It goes on and on and on and on and on, but it's like this blank canvas that people sort of have it already has a connection as an art toy, and then they see what they can do with it. It's like, So it's really neat. So are these worth a lot of money? Yeah, you know, so certain ones, you know, they're more about the $100, $200, $300 range, having them customized, as opposed to, you know, the Bearbricks that can be very expensive. Buying the vinyl, I think there's like $10 to $20 just for the basic character. So this is sort of now the lower range. So so that we have Bearbrick, so we have Michael Lau, we have Bearbrick, and then we have Kid Robot Company, that's been around since 2002. And then the one that you are probably most familiar with is Funko Incorporated, and they have their series of collectibles called Funko Pops. So this is from 2011, started in Washington in the States, and they are feeding big time into popular culture. That's why they're called Funko Pops, popular culture, right? So they have these vinyl characters, and each character is just based on something from popular culture, whether, again, video games, movies, TV shows, comic books, all that same sort of stuff. But you can buy these in the malls. These are, I don't know, like $15. These collectible, they are art toys, collectible art toys, but kind of for like everyday people. It's like what people can afford. So again, you have Michael Lau stuff that just sells for crazy stuff. You have Bearbrick, that is really high-end limited editions, very collectible, very expensive. You have Kid Robot, that's you know, affordable, a little bit more rare. And then you have Funko Pops that are for everyday people that, you know, easily $15 you can buy with. Some of them end up being worth more money for sure. You know, you're not going to get into the thousands of dollars. So those are sort of like the culture of where art toys are coming from, and their connections to popular culture, and their connections to art, and their connections to street art and everyday sort of media. Okay, so I mean, there's so much more to talk about. You probably know a lot more than I do. I mean, I was looking on places like this that just show you all the different things that you could collect, and just to give you an idea about, you know, different toys, how much they are. These are new ones. There's ones, they have Koons as like an artist for Bearbrick. Whoa, blocked at school. Okay, anyway, lots of really great stuff. So there's so much information in there, but that's why we're doing what we're doing and how it connects to everything else. Okay, so let's start designing so we can actually make your toy.